I don't know why, but one of these days I asked Pandora if she wanted to watch a movie with me. She seemed pleasantly surprised. Don't go thinking of me as a human woman, okay? But I guess that would be cool. We watched it together in the living room, Pandora saying ahs and oohs for everything. Just then I realized that no one ever treated her like someone that might have interests or would want to see the world. Now that I knew that she did, I both wanted and had a duty to give her some exciting things to do. After I dreamed of her tragic story, I saw some flashes of her with previous owners of the farm. Lou was the only one who ever lived peacefully with her, but he never approached her the way I did. Maybe I'm the fool, but I didn't like the idea of just tolerating each other. After that day, Pandora started to spend her days binging every single movie, sitcom, and anime that I could find for her, and she thought that everything was great, no matter how cliché or low effort the story was. Since she didn't need to sleep, eat anything but the 2 daily raw chicken meals, or do chores other than to protect the house from invaders, Pandora went through the streaming service's catalogs in a heartbeat, and I soon saw myself going back to old-fashioned, illegal torrent. Her daily routine consisted mostly of watching a bunch of things, then, after dinner time, having me watch her favorite thing with her so she could make comments about it. I thought this was really sweet. Being a binge watcher myself, we often spent hours in that activity, and I think that's when she really started to warm up to me, in her own demonic way. Pandora? Yeah? I love you, and you're my best friend. She laughed. Her face said, you don't have to be extra nice to me just because you know I have a tragic past. Okay, nerd, but I'm your only friend. You're lonely and lame. I laughed too. If she was mocking me with such gusto, it meant that she was feeling at ease. Can I ask you something? She nodded. What would happen if I hypothetically one day got married and had kids? You'd be lamer. I mean, about the house. First of all, you only go outside in those ugly jeans, so you getting a man is not a real threat, she smiled. But I think you'd better sell the house. I'm unruly, you know. I can't promise not to harm more than one person at a time. It's not a demon's nature. Would you be fine without me? I asked, truly concerned. She laughed again. Bitch, I've been here since your great-grandmother was a cutie, and I'll be here forever. But thanks to you, I'll give the next owner a 4th rule. Get me a Netflix subscription, or I'll kill you. We didn't talk about the specific details of Pandora's past, as I didn't want to be hurtful or rude. It must have been really hard for her to even share all those memories with me. I didn't ask a second time about what she did when she left the house. But not the property per se, as she couldn't. According to what that strange demon told her, I assumed that the putrid smell meant that she had been reanimating her grandfather and brother to beat the shit out of them again. But I didn't really know how or where she kept the bodies. I can only assume they are buried somewhere around the farm, because her nails are always full of dirt when she comes back. Many of you suggested that I told her about my ex, but at that point, I felt the exact opposite. How can I tell a woman that went through all the 7 hells that I lived in fear for my life because the man I trusted humiliated and slapped me sometimes? I'm not downplaying this kind of abuse. I knew I had every right to suffer, and I knew that I had to leave him, but when compared to her, it was a smaller problem. He hadn't tried to contact me at all this time, and Pandora would attack any intruder anyway, so I thought it was best to leave it at that. In other news, I bought her a pair of expensive flamboyant shoes, and was waiting for an opportunity to gift it to her. I also started renovating the third bedroom, using any spare money and time I had available. I wanted to decorate it in a way that looked like a stage in a fancy dressing room, so she'd feel at home there. And to try avoiding getting any more people attacked by Pandora, I had a personalized warning sign made in the nearby city. For your own safety, do not trespass. The house itself might hurt you. Ring the doorbell. If it doesn't work, call me. Regarding my poor cousin, I called my mother to ask about her state daily. Luckily, Alyssa's concussion didn't leave any permanent damage. Her eye was swollen to the point of not opening for a few days. Then her vision was blurry for a few more, but other than that, she was fine. Even the awful bump in her head was completely gone after a few weeks. I imagine that Pandora didn't hit Alyssa with all her might because she didn't seem particularly menacing, or because the trespasser was a woman. I felt horribly guilty nonetheless, especially because the casserole was delicious. So I spent roughly 1/3 of my monthly income sending her nice stuff like a fruit basket, then a chocolate gift basket, some sunflowers, they were her favorite, wines and cheeses from my local farmer's market, and even a balloon and plush bear holding a heart that read "Get well soon." Since she was always the one doing kind stuff for others, I hope that being a little pampered once could make up for the awful incident at least a little. However, I'll admit that the confrontation always made me panic, so I avoided directly talking to her, and to my judgmental aunt, like the plague. Unfortunately for me, one day Alyssa's mother was at my mom's house and they called me. I was taken by surprise and couldn't avoid talking to her. I hate sisterly bounds and schemes. She lectured me for half an hour about how dangerous it was for a girl to live alone in the woods. "It's not in the woods, Shelley, it's a farm, and you know it's pretty close to town," my mother corrected her in the background. Especially in a damn haunted house. And that if I was in such a financial pinch, she'd help me sell this awful thing and find a decent apartment to live. Aunt Shelley made nonsensical suggestions, like having me stay at her place. "It's less than 2 hours away. I could really use a bridge partner when Alyssa leaves, and my guinea pig will love the extra company," making all the family pitch in to help me buy a property that's not haunted, pawning her grandmother's heirloom, and even that I immediately find a husband so I can move in with him. Come on, Shelley, you know she's been through a lot. Or a wife. Wow, Aunt Shelley. Thanks for being a progressive crazy person. I said I appreciated the concern. Honestly, I didn't. But I was really happy there. She then said that maybe the house put a spell on me to make me think that I'm happy, and insisted that I leave it immediately. She'd even help me pay the rent. My aunt isn't a bad person, and I know that this came from a place of worry, but she can be a handful. Talking to her, or rather, listening to her long monologue with my mother's director's cut, gave me an awful headache. Both my writing job and the chores of the farm were relatively taken care of, so I indulged myself in a marvelous, aspirin-induced, late afternoon nap. I woke up to a sound that can only be described as a tank invading my yard. "Holy shit, it's the Colonel's army!" Goofy voice announced, sounding really concerned. "Sorry for the language, madam. Please stay very still and quiet." "We'll have to go this time, Miss Melinda. It's all hands on deck today," old lady announced gently, then yelled like a general, "Flying head stew! Legless Linda! Bun face! You're allowed to act today!" It's hard to describe the noises that followed. What you could hear the most were the chains and the moans of agony. It was like all the souls of the damned from the whole universe decided to hold a conference in my yard. Then Pandora kept yelling things like, "How many times do I have to tell you that that son of a whore colonel isn't here? Just go to the fucking light, you morons," as she dashed with her strange-looking longsword, clanking it against the chains. And then there was Legless Linda's laugh, among some of the other strange noises that I couldn't identify. She sounded like, and I think she was, a particularly vicious old witch. It took Pandora over an hour to come fetch me, something that had never happened before. Ugh, I'm beat. Let's watch that super silly musical again, she announced at my doorframe. What happened? I asked, concerned. It wasn't like me to ask about her business, but it was mostly because she could deal all right with the other invaders. We sat on the couch and I put Grease on for us. Menaces that are pitiful are the worst. Did you know that this used to be a farm with over 1,000 slaves? I figured this land probably had slaves, but I couldn't imagine how many. Of course, this used to be a way bigger farm, extending to the neighboring properties too. But the slave owner's mansion used to sit right here where we are, including most of your yard and the hennery too. I nodded. When slavery became illegal, that horrible colonel invited all the slaves he had at the time. I was able to count at least 80 for a banquet at the mansion, supposedly. What actually happened was the racist scum locking them inside and burning the mansion to the ground, because he thought that, if not to serve him, they didn't deserve to live. It took me at least 20 minutes to let that sink in, and I'm not ashamed to say that I broke down crying. My brain couldn't process such cruelty, especially because, since the government didn't offer any aid for the recently released slaves who had literally nothing, most pro-slavery farmers, when forced to release their slaves, ended up just hiring them for pennies, and they lived pretty much the same life, but now legally as free people. But this colonel didn't even think that they deserved that infinitesimal change for the best. He was evil and rotten. For a time, before even me, they had been returning. No one knows when they'll show up. It could take months, years, even decades for the next raid. But they always come back so full of sorrow and angst. They're so blind that they firmly believe that the colonel is still here, and they want to destroy him. That's understandable, I replied. Yeah, I know all that because every time their chains touch me or my underlings, we see and feel it all they went through. That's why the battle is always so slow. This, and because I avoid destroying them completely, so they have one teeny chance of just moving on and going to the frigging light. That's awful, I whimpered. So the colonel's ghost is not here anymore? Nope. Went to hell or wherever else a long time ago. Isn't it unfair how he gets to move on with his afterlife, while these people have to suffer as spectrums? They look so awful, all burned down, pieces of their bodies falling as they move. And it's not even only the 80 or so that were burned. All the slaves he ever owned want to destroy him, and we have to fight more as the first ones fall and more enter the property. It sounded like a tank entering the yard, I remarked, still fighting back the urge to cry over all this senseless cruelty. Oh, that's because some of their forms are so mangled and wry that they fused with their chains and with each other, working as a vehicle for the ones that are, more or less, in one piece above them, she explained. We watched the movie in silence for a while. Pandora seemed more relaxed because she started letting out small laughs and muttering, "Her hair is ridiculous," every time the camera closed in on Sandy. On my end, I was still trying to process these incredibly dark pieces of information. Pandora? Is it okay if I give you a little something I bought? Is it an extra chicken? I'm good. I just eat them because of a contract. I shook my head and grabbed a brilliant pink box that I'd been keeping hidden for a few weeks. I then got on my knees to help Pandora put our brand new shoes on. "Shit, what are you doing? We can't get married." She seemed truly concerned that I was going to propose. I laughed and showed her a pair of very artistic, flamboyant high heels. Something that Lady Gaga would wear, but in a more affordable price range. I'm still only a writer with a mortgage to pay after all. It was weird to choose the ideal size because she didn't have toes, but then I figured that with hooves it was way easier to wear extravagant heels, since those always hurt your toes the most. She was so happy she even started criticizing every hairstyle in the movie with more scorn and gusto than ever, and she never took them off. "Melinda." "Yeah?" I suck." She seemed like she wanted to say I'm sorry, but couldn't bring herself to do it. She seemed to be gathering some courage to go ahead. "I shouldn't have attacked your relative. It's just that her mentioning the P-man and the H thing." I inferred that she meant the priest in the holy water. "Those really hurt me, you know? And the others too. It's physical torture. It won't banish us to the house. No. These very grounds. Well, it's time Lakota tells you all about the complicated shit that's way above my pay grade." "Lakota?" I screamed as a tall Native American, older female in typical clothes and braids suddenly materialized in the living room. Unlike the other ghosts, who had names like Legless Linda or Burnface that suggested a lethal injury, neither her name nor her body carried anything suggestive of her cosa mortis. Lakota was beautiful in a sense, like an old and intelligent aunt you looked up to. Everything in her suggested a strength that wasn't unlike a force of nature. She looked calm as the eye of a hurricane. She carried herself in a manner of a wise and compassionate leader. "Hello, kid. I'm what you call a shaman, and I've been tied to this place as an eternal observer since before your people first walked these lands." Her mouth didn't move, but I could hear her pleasant and energetic voice inside my mind. "You see, the leader of my tribe, contradicting the belief of nearly all the other Sioux, didn't think there was an afterlife. To him, the only way to put our souls to rest was tying them to a piece of land that was specifically made for the dead. A cemetery for your spirit, one could say." I nodded. It sounded like something that would go terribly wrong. Over the millennia, that ended up creating some sort of magnetic field that attracts lost souls, especially the ones who died wishing for vengeance. A drain for those that are neither alive nor have crossed whatever there is to cross. And, most of all, a raft that brings on journeys in the outer planes end up using as a patch, or as a door to wreak havoc in the world of the living. "To sum it up," Pandora intervened, "your place is cursed as fuck."
Chronicler here. We here at Creepy Spaghet would like to thank Poloniumpoisoning for allowing us to tell their story. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe to stay updated on these terrible tales, and make sure to check out the author in the links below. If you're interested in having your story narrated, be sure to reach out to our humble overseer, as he continues his journey to pull the darkest stories from the infinite depths of the internet. Until next time, fiends, and remember, we are darkness.